Why did the Renaissance, a time of incredible art and new ideas, start in Italy and not somewhere else like France or Spain? The answer is more surprising than you might think. It wasn't just about talented artists suddenly appearing. It involves a fallen empire, rich bankers, and a lucky accident of geography. For centuries, Europe was stuck in what we call the Middle Ages. Life was tough, and the powerful Roman Empire was a distant memory. Most people were focused on survival, not on creating beautiful paintings or studying ancient books. But in Italy, things were a little different. Unlike the rest of Europe, which was mostly farmland ruled by kings and lords, Italy was a collection of powerful city-states. Think of them as mini-countries, cities like Florence, Venice, and Milan that ruled themselves and the lands around them. These city-states were buzzing with activity. They were major centers for trade and business. Their location was perfect. Italy is a peninsula sticking out into the Mediterranean Sea, a highway for trade ships. Italian merchants in cities like Venice and Genoa controlled the trade routes to the east. They brought back silks, spices, and incredible wealth. This trade didn't just bring in money, it brought in new ideas and knowledge from different cultures. Another huge factor was Italy's unique history. It was the heart of the old Roman Empire. Everywhere you looked, there were reminders of ancient Rome's glory. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, aqueducts, and statues were all still there. For Italians, this wasn't just old rubble. It was a source of immense pride and inspiration. They saw what their ancestors had built and wanted to be that great again. While the rest of Europe saw Roman ruins as just old stones, Italians saw them as a blueprint for greatness. This connection to the past gave them a special advantage. They started to study the art, architecture, and philosophy of the ancient Romans and Greeks. This rediscovery of classical knowledge is the very definition of the Renaissance, which literally means rebirth. But studying old books and digging up statues costs money, a lot of money. This is where the wealthy merchants and bankers come in. Families like the Medici in Florence became unbelievably rich through trade and banking. They had more money than many kings and queens in Europe, and they wanted to show off their wealth and power. How did they do that? By becoming patrons of the arts. They hired artists, architects, and scholars to create masterpieces. They paid for grand cathedrals, beautiful paintings, and magnificent sculptures. It was a way of saying, look how successful and sophisticated we are. A man named Cosimo de' Medici in Florence was a master of this. He spent a fortune on art, basically funding the early Renaissance in his city. He wasn't just buying art, he was investing in culture and knowledge, turning Florence into the epicenter of this new movement. This system of patronage meant that talented people didn't have to worry about farming or fighting. They could dedicate their entire lives to their craft. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo weren't just painting in their spare time. It was their full-time job, funded by the rich and powerful. This created a competitive environment. Cities and wealthy families competed to have the best artists and the most impressive buildings. This competition pushed artists to innovate and create ever more incredible works. Now, for a surprising twist. A major catastrophe actually helped fuel the Renaissance. In the mid-1300s, the Black Death swept across Europe, and Italy was hit especially hard. It was a terrible tragedy, but it had an unexpected economic effect. With so many people gone, the survivors found themselves in a better position. Wages went up because there were fewer workers. People inherited money and property from relatives who had passed away. This created a new level of wealth among ordinary people, not just the super-rich bankers. People started spending this new money on better clothes, better food, and yes, even art for their homes. It also changed how people thought about life. Life was short and unpredictable. This encouraged a shift in focus from the afterlife, which dominated medieval thinking, to making the most of life here and now. This idea is called humanism. Humanism was a key philosophy of the Renaissance. It celebrated human potential, achievement, and creativity. Instead of just focusing on religious subjects, artists started painting portraits, scenes from mythology, and everyday life. They studied human anatomy to make their figures more realistic. Scientific research became crucial. Leonardo da Vinci famously dissected bodies to understand how muscles and bones worked. This was a radical departure from the flat, symbolic art of the Middle Ages. Another key event happened in 1453, the the city of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Ottoman Turks. Constantinople was a treasure chest of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge. For over 1,000 years, it had preserved texts that were lost in Western Europe. When the city fell, many scholars fled. Where did they go? They went to Italy, bringing their precious books and knowledge with them. They arrived in cities like Florence and Venice, where wealthy patrons and a curious public were eager to learn from them. This flood of new information supercharged the Renaissance. Suddenly, Italians had access to all of Plato's works and countless other Greek texts on science, math, and philosophy. Finally, there was the number of talented individuals. Italy seemed to produce an incredible number of geniuses in a short period. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello. It wasn't something in the water. It was the result of a perfect storm: wealth, competition, a rediscovery of the past, and a culture that valued art and innovation. A young boy with artistic talent in Florence had a much better chance of becoming a master than a boy in rural England. He had access to teachers, patrons, and the inspiration of ancient art all around him. So, the Renaissance didn't happen in Italy by chance. It was the unique combination of its geography, its Roman past, its wealthy city-states, and a series of key historical events. It was a rebirth fueled by money, pride, and an insatiable curiosity about the world and humanity's place in it. The Italian Renaissance then spread its light across the rest of Europe, changing the world forever. We hope you enjoyed this look into the past. For more stories that make history come alive, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Historical Repo.